I'm going to order the Citizen Rate Review Committee for Newberg, Oregon, whatever day this is. Sorry, September 15th? 13th, 2023. I want Friday really bad. All right. And so Heather, can we do roll call, please?
Yes. Okay. Jennifer Bean, Thomas Rinke, Ron Sinicki, and then Ned Knight, Derek Duff, Derek Wharf, Peggy Kilberg, Anna Aresnault. It's good. Everybody's here.
All right. I can't shut it off. Oh, pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, community business. We have presentations on water. I can't show.
My name is Fatin Abdullah. Engineering, working with the engineering department. I'm the project manager for a groundwater treatment, the new groundwater treatment plant. That's
I'll also just add, we have Sharon with us here tonight. She's one of our utility billing specialists. So if any technical questions come up, she's our expert on the water bills.
Fatin also manages our TMDL program, which is the total maximum daily load program, which is a requirement in a report that we put out to the EPA each year. And she's also a project manager for the Winooski Stormwater Project. I didn't want to let her sell herself short there.
yeah, I'm humbled.
Sorry. Yep. So whenever you're ready to begin your presentation.
Presentation? Okay. Yeah, we are here for the capital project water for the 5 years review. So can you next slide? So the importance of the water project for the city is related to the life of the public, and it's for the communities. This is the process how we capital project improvement. It's community vision, city council, goal, master plan, and operation need, regulatory and application, and then fund, then the projects. It's next slide. So the drinking water, it's important. We can't stand to be doing without water. The source of water, we have to discuss the source of water, water treatment, storage, water distribution, and will provide safety and portable water supply and sorry. Yeah. Okay. So next slide. So for the community value, we provide safe, high quality water to ensure the city has water supply for the future with the capacity to grow and the public grounds, and the business also for growing, and prepare the community for earthquakes or other disasters, provide the most benefit for the lowest life cycle cost. Also, we consider provide an increment solution that prepare for the long term, the continuous city ownership and control of the water supply. So this the GIS plan map for the many of water projects and project system in the city. This is the plan for pipes or the whole system of the city. Many water projects are added to the list due to the new mandatory and requirement. City water system has many water lines that it's old and aging, at least than 8 inches diameter, and many are cast iron. It's very old. Pipes eventually need to replace, and we with the new our water treatment plant, we need a new system, not the old system. So this slide is the proposed 5 years water projects. As you see, the projects put in this plan with the budget. As you see, we have a new groundwater treatment for these 5 years budget, and we have these all projects in progress or in design, or some, as you see in the end of this table, these projects are finished or shelved. So we'll talk about each of these projects individually in the next slide.
Got a question about the
Yes.
slide.
Yes.
Is this in any particular order? Is it in priority order or just random?
So the ones that are in beige up at the top, and the other one down there. Oh, sorry, I remember when I created this table, the order I put them in is like when they either started, finished like funding. So I tried to get all the projects that finished in 23-24 in the first column, and so on and so forth like that. So the order may not appear directly obvious.
Okay. And the order or the projects themselves, you have ones that are existing,
Mhm.
one you think that you need based upon potential. And then you have, and the surprises can always change your list.
Yeah, so we've got the ones that are in progress, and the ones that we think we need or that we plan for are the ones that came out of the master plan, which was very in-depth
Yeah.
study and analysis of needs based on population forecasting.
Exactly.
And identified issues that were done out in the field with various amounts of testing, whether that was for water, it would have been like pressure, flow, age of pipe, and leak
Yeah.
detection, things like that.
We try to develop our system, water system. Yeah, because the city have a very old system. So when we work with the big project, a new groundwater treatment plant, we need a new system. We need to have, so not to have every aspect in this city have a new pipes with a good connection, that not we lost the water we produce in this. So as you see, it's this is like a strategy to the future and the recent, and in 5 years planning for the project system. All its provider system, provide the source of water, the producing water, and the connection of the water and reservoir.
Surprises come in the form of usually like state mandated projects or unfunded state mandated projects, like the House Bill 2001 project, which was we have to have these done by, I think it's 2027 or 2029. And so those come before any other priority because it's state mandated. And then same with the kind of the timeline on the groundwater treatment plant itself.
That's a key point. There's some projects that are on here that may not get done based upon other priorities, potentially. Emergencies happen sometimes, and so if they do, so this list is not in stone, it's proposed for the budget.
Correct.
That they have, and they work within that budget that they have.
That was gonna be my other question. So I see 2 projects have been shelved. One's been put on hold. Is that as a result of some of these regulatory requirements that require us to do one project versus maybe these that some of which we have zero cost associated with, but $70,000 for the north non-potable water line in Otis Springs pumping improvements.
Those were shelved, due to council direction. Just, what you could call community priorities should.
Are there any other projects that are not on this list?
Yes, we've got, so the water master plan itself outlines 20 years worth of work to get from infrastructure that supports our current population to the population we expect 20 years from now. So there's many, many more projects, and they are all outlined in the water master.
There we go. Are all these projects listed? They've already started? Are any of them new for the 23-24 budget?
What do you mean by, can you repeat, did you say do or new?
New.
Are they any?
Are all of these already in progress? Or would any of these be new for, or the first year of funding or need for funding is 23-24?
Yeah, in the next slide, you can see the next slide in progress or in construction,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, so we'll see in the next slide, we explain which project it's in process, which the project is finished or canceled. As you see, the new groundwater treatment is in the process in design now. We are in 30% design, so it's in process. Elliot Road, it's now in construction. Maybe finished in the end of the year. Emergency connection, it's in progress, so we work on it. Seismic resilience, cast iron and concrete pipe replacement, not start yet. And we have north non-potable water. This is put on hold by the council. Redundant water supply, it's in progress. We have the budget, but we still planning for it. HP 201 program, we have these phases. We finished phases and we have still working on in progress in design. So
I got a
1, 2,
question.
3, yes.
A question on that. That HB 2001 in design, and then if you go back to the previous one, $1.29 million just for design. Because that's what's budgeted for this year in the previous slide.
Yeah, it's the design of 9 different sites.
Okay.
Yes, it's different sizes,
A lot
different
like
lines.
just design.
Maybe we're going to in further slides, but I think I heard you say that the groundwater treatment is in its 50% design or halfway design.
30%.
Okay.
30%.
On the next slide, it shows us in progress versus in design.
Yes.
Is that,
Yeah, in
what would-
progress in design, yeah.
So it transferred rapidly from in progress to in design because it's a very what do you call expedited project. So if it's in progress, it's usually like we're thinking about it, we've got the money for it, it's in the plan, and if it's in design, then someone's currently actually working with a consultant on it. And this one being really fast moving, just really quickly went from in progress to in design.
so it's actually in design?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I could just get a little more clarification, 30% design means 30% of it has been designed? Is that what the 30% refers to?
Yeah, 30% design is, you can think of like the kettle is 30% full. So it's kind of like 30% design is usually like footprint phase. We know where things are gonna go, how much room they're gonna take up, the impacts. We're looking at our easements and like we've got like a 30% clarity of the total picture.
Yes, and the big picture of the project, yes.
Yeah.
Those are standard metrics for any engineering design is 30, 50, 100.
Oh, okay, that's helpful.
So that's just industry standard and how they go about doing it.
Thank you.
Where we are. Upsizing, yeah, we have the budget for the upsizing, main and construction, new distribution loops to improve fire. So we need for the fire flow capacity. We need to upgrade our pipes for the fire. So it's important thing you have to. We have seismic improvement at water reservoir. This is planning to, it's in a progress. We not start yet. We have the budget, but we do not start yet. For the Butler property improvement, not start yet. We have the budget, but we don't now. start yet.
What is that Butler property? Where the Chevrolet dealership used to be is downtown. And it's just a grassy area with a path across it right now. So how is water involved in an improvement on that?
It's this location that we want to put a public toilet for the benefit of the citizens,
Okay.
downtown versatility. So yeah,
Got it.
that's the public toilet location.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Iowa risk and resilience assessment, we have the budget, but we not start yet. North College Street, valve relocation is partially finished. And North College Street, Elder, it's complete. River Street, it's complete, finished this summer, and Bill West pump
Can I go
station.
back one? I'm sorry.
Mhm.
The valve relocation, it doesn't sound like a huge deal, but there's no dollar value on the previous slide. I'm just curious, is that part of the budget? If you go
the-
back one slide, there's nothing in that row. I'm just curious, maybe it was a typo omission or something.
It's no longer, so the project was put on hold. No, sorry, it was canceled and we've already spent what we've spent on it. And what happened was we weren't able to complete the entirety of the project because of the very unique construction of the pipe itself. So the project was essentially finished early.
Okay.
And so it's no longer part of any future budget.
And can I ask a question? Is it Fatine?
Yes,
Am I saying that correct?
yes.
A couple of times, well, throughout this part here where we're going through the itemization of projects, you said we have the budget, it hasn't been started, or it has been started. When you say we have the budget, is that budget that's been accrued in prior years? And you no longer need additional, or what we're seeing is additional to existing? What does we have the budget mean?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so what she's saying is that we have it in the planned budget. So we have it budgeted, but we don't actually currently have that money. So,
Yeah, we
and
plan for it.
yeah,
Okay.
and one of the reasons why they're not started is because they are planned for 2025, 6 or 7, because in our models, that's when we can afford that and that extra piece based on our projections. Thank you. Also, Derek, to answer your previous question, I think the newest, a brand new project that wasn't expected for this year would have been the Butler property improvements. So that's new.
So 75,000 for a toilet or bathroom,
That's half the cost.
half the cost.
Yeah, the other half's in the wastewater. That's
Steal, man.
Wow, really?
And just for clarification, when does fiscal year 23-24 start and
23-24 has started.
July 1.
Yeah.
July is the, okay,
July, yeah.
great, thank you.
Okay, the last 2 projects, it's canceled by the council, right? Okay, so new groundwater treatment plant. So because the city currently has one source of water and we have aging groundwater treatment plant. So it's constructed in 1953. And we, in 2021, okay, for the population, it's designed for population in 1953 for 4,000 people. So we have in 2021, the population of the city of Newberg, it's 25,000. So we predict in 2035 will be population over 38,000. So the groundwater, the recent groundwater, it's aging, and we spent a lot of money to improve it and to fix it. This money, we can build a new one that produce a water covered for the future population increase. So the groundwater treatment plant is a new building and modern facility. It's the equipment, the things, it's in the building. It's not open, and it's approximately product. It's designed and built to currently required and code standard. Next slide.
I have a real general question. I think you said the projection is what, 55,000 people here by 2050?
38.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, anyway, that's gonna take a lot more water. Is there any concern that those well fields, the amount of groundwater is adequate or will
Yeah.
be enough to supply all the anticipated growth?
Yes. So we search for another source for the water.
Mhm,
It's not just the groundwater treatment.
right.
No, groundwater. We search for the surface water.
Mhm.
So we now planning to find rights of surface water use for to buy rights of to use surface water.
Yeah, wasn't there a $2 million purchase of surface water rights? I believe that was last year, or something like that.
It hasn't processed yet.
In the
Okay.
process.
Is this?
So will this groundwater treatment plant be able to process surface water as well? Because you've got all different chemicals and
Yes.
treatment
it's
things. to
different. Yeah,
take
we
care of.
have to build another project. In future.
And can I make one comment on the treatment plant too? For those who were on the rate review committee last cycle, we had a whole analysis that we did, just because we were trying to debate whether or not we upgrade our existing groundwater treatment plant, because this was also a state mandate where we had to get it updated by 2027. So we were debating, because the treatment plant itself is 70 years old. And so we were debating whether or not it was worth putting millions of dollars into a 70-year-old plant versus building a whole new one that has more capacity. And based on a lot of our population estimates and stuff, the committee and council at the time had decided it would be better to move forward with the new plant based on the additional capacity, and just because the old one was 70 years old and there wasn't a huge price difference. I mean, there was, price difference, but when you're putting millions of dollars into an old plant versus millions of dollars into something else that could potentially last another 70 years, the committee had kind of decided there was a good cost analysis benefit there.
Yeah, this slide showed the information about the project cost. We estimate total project cost, it's 27 million. And we request amount of from WFIA loan, about 13 million. And the cost of the construction and design. The design, it's the contractor design, it's Consur. And the construction, it's sliding. We already buy the land for the land acquisition, and we have another cost. So the total cost of this project, it's about 27 million with the WFIA amount loan.
And just to, yeah, can I add something really quick to that? Because I bet it's gonna be your question. The actual plant is not 27 million. We had to bundle other capital projects to qualify for this WIFIA loan.
Yes.
So the WIFIA loan is a special public works water infrastructure loan type. And so in order to qualify for it, because we're now considered a medium-sized city because we're over the 25,000 population, we had to get a certain dollar amount of project total for related to water to qualify for the 49% match that we're seeing up here. So we had to kind of bundle up other capital projects that are included with water, like the emergency control center is part of it, the land purchase was part of it. Help me, Sarah, here, what else was part of that? The seismic upgrades were part of it. So it's not just the construction of the new plant itself. There are other components to that as well.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Katie, as soon as you asked me, my mind went blank.
Okay, next slide. So this is the slide, it's history and the schedule of the project. So we start planning on 2017. We put the Newberg water master plan. And 2018, 2021 study and analysis of the alternatives. 2021 we update riverfront master plan, and then we secured secured water right for the secondary water source. 2022, 2023 water master plan, CIP update, water system. And 2023 we hired construction management general construction management and general contractor, CMGM sliding. 2023, 2027, this is the design permanently and construction. And 2023 groundwater treatment plant to operate and will produce the water. 2029 and 2032 additional seismic resilience projects related to this project.
Question, is it fair to say we are between hire construction manager and design permitting
Yes.
today,
Yes.
right
Today.
now?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Next slide. This would look like the project. It's
What's the current
yeah, the current design.
concept? There you go. That's the word I'm thinking of.
And would this be on Winooski Road? Is that roughly?
Yes. And next slide. This is the plan for the filtration and system, and we have the pumps, pump and filtration system, and we have management, operation office.
Do you know what those red lines that are drawn in there represent?
I
think that's general flow of water.
Yeah.
What kind of flows?
Okay.
Water
Yes,
flow.
the flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
So the next project is Elliot Road water line replacement. It's in construction. This project to provide a new water line in the North Elliot Road. And it's part of the Elliot Road improvement project. So it's in construction. I think it's will finished this summer, right?
Yeah, but it'll be done by the end of the year. The water line portion itself is finished.
Yeah.
The rest of the project will be done soon.
Are we gonna dive farther into the water treatment plant building? Or was that the recap for today?
That was the recap for today.
Can I ask one more a follow-up question on that, just to help understand size and scope? So what would be the capacity, what's the new capacity versus old capacity? Assuming all the other efficiencies are in place for a modern design. What capacity do we have in the current building? And what would this be going to?
5 million per day.
5 million
Per-
gallons.
Gallons per day, yeah.
Okay.
The new one, it's 9.
So we're gonna go from 5 to 9?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's to support going from 25 to 58,000 people, I assume.
Yes.
We go above 58.
38.
Oh, was it 38? 38. Okay,
58,000, we better be expanding.
yeah, yeah. I like 38 a lot better. Okay, but that's,
I thought it was 55 by 2038.
It's 38.
38 by 2050.
Is it 55? Yeah, 2055. It's 38,000.
By,
That's the important.
We'll double check our slide
Yes.
here.
okay,
Yeah, for
Finish in Springbrook, so
20
you're gonna be over.
21, we are now 25,000. And by 2035, we predict it's 38,000.
30, 2030.
Yes.
Thank you.
No. Okay, other slide.
So just for context, we're having fun with all this. The decision, like the next this year's budget. That's city council. We here are doing the rates for 2024, 2025,
It is for 25, 26.
25, 26.
Yeah.
Just the scope. To make sure we're all clear, because we love getting into all the details. We're gonna ask about 1,000 questions, but just clear. Our role is Deb is gonna make a proposal for the rates for 2025, 2026. And we go off and that proposal is ours to whether say yay or nay. And then that goes to city council and then they get to vote on it.
But isn't that rate contingent upon these projects?
It ties into it softly, per se. Because like I said, those budgets is a plan. Now, obviously, we started money, right? How they allocate the money, they can slow down the project if they wanted to, right? They can go off and say our estimates or whatever. So there is the plan. There is improvement, there's repair, and then there's, oh my gosh, emergency, right?
Yeah.
And emergency can do things. For example, the state can pass a regulation that is unfunded that they have to respond to. I think that happened 2 years ago. Yes, that is, yeah, I got some cobwebs in my memory, so I just gotta double check myself. Those things happen and then they have to respond to that. But I just want for the big picture of it, there's pieces of it, but they will fit within the budget that they have. That Deb is gonna propose, and that's gonna be the budget that they're gonna have to work within 25, 26. And as they negotiate that, the city council is gonna oversee that. Does that make sense? Am I seeing this so far? Cool. Go start.
Just small question clarification. You're talking about calendar years, 25 and 26, not a fiscal. Okay.
Yep. January 25 and January 26 are when the water rates change.
And then again, just for clarification, if a developer comes in to put a new project, those projects would be funded by the developer fees associated with that, correct? And then the rate fees associated with that would be going to these improvement and regulatory costs associated with that. Am I correct to assume that? So like the SDCs would go, like if we have to put new piping, you mentioned the Springbrook properties. If we had to put new piping in to support a number of new houses, the SDCs would cover the charges associated with that. In theory, okay, and then the rates are really more for improvements and to really make sure the city can operate within the current realm of what we're doing from a water and waste perspective then.
Yeah, I think, your point is really important to make. The council is going to be reviewing, or they have been reviewing. We've had an SDC committee who's been reviewing our SDCs because some of them have kind of been out of whack. Like the water one, for example, we have hardly any revenue in there and we're building a new groundwater treatment plant, which that would have been very useful money to have. So that's something that the council is going to be looking at here soon to hopefully try and make some changes, some for the better for that water revenue specifically, and then just better ones in general for transportation and stuff when we get to that one.
So the other project we're working on it, it's emergency connection and control at water treatment plant. So this is to implement needed to improve the water system. So we have adding a point to emergency. So it's to shut down the when in emergency we have this system to shut down the wheel or the pumps from shifting the water to the water treatment. So it's in progress. It's not finished yet. Right?
Yeah, can I add to that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, this is part of the WIFIA loans for the groundwater treatment plant, and it is an emergency control so that if something happens on the treatment plant side, then we can switch this valve and we can keep water in the pipes and put everyone on a boil order. And so we're thinking like earthquake or other unfortunate man-made means. But anyways, yeah. Sorry, I got distracted there.
The other project is a systemic improvement to existing. So we have to take care of the existing system. So we replaced of existing water main for if it's happened a quake or something disaster happened. So we have to improve our old pipes.
On this map, all the red lines, it says, I think, critical pipes, all those are needing replacement.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
It would be very wise of us to replace this.
Okay, and we've got a grand total of about 1.5 million if you add those four numbers.
Yes.
That's miles and miles of pipe.
Yeah.
Is that enough to replace all that? It seems like it's not gonna be that close.
Yeah, with today's economy, likely we'll
No,
see when
but
we
you
get
can
there.
Yeah. I know, right?
That's true, that's true. We won't be able to do all of it. And
Yeah.
so this program also extends beyond the 27-28. So this will be something we'd be paying for
Yeah.
a long time, much longer than these 4 years.
These numbers include inflation prices and the cost of materials today.
And
There's about a 3.5% increase year over year on these. I'm assuming that's.
Yeah. yeah, with the,
Thank
I have models from Deb that I got that help me include the inflation of these programs over time.
Yeah, the engineering department put the plans, calculate the cost, or estimate the cost, and we give it to the finance to review and put their plans on. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, this HB 2001 water lines, it's 8 major and 1 minor water lines project for the South Study area have been identified by the city council consultant for mandatory. It's for middle housing requirement up upon the city Newberg. So it's the cost, as you see, it's about 7 million to improve the pipes. It's in progress. This project, we upsizing and several pipe in the area of South downtown Newberg.
Yeah, this was one of the unfunded state mandates for fire flow because we have the middle housing requirements from the state now. We're expecting more density. And what's really interesting about this project is that we have to upsize some of these pipes because the velocities to get fire flow are so strong that we're going to be ripping the pipes out from the inside. So kind of an interesting engineering conundrum that happens there.
Yeah, and the next project, it's the fire flow variant. So we have, as Sarah mentioned, we have a velocity, high velocity of fire flow. So we need to upgrade the city water system to meet the minimum flow and pressure requirement for the detected by the state. This project funded by the SDC and Water Rate Fund. As you see, it's in 2 years phase years, and it's about the increase in the sustainability and provide for the priority for the Newberg, along with the response to the community to go to the project increase health and safety. We have seismic improvement at the existing water reservoir. We have to take care also to our reservoir for water reservoir. So a recent risk and resilience assessment report in May 2021 that the city reservoir at North Valley required to retroute for the seismic, and we need to protect this from the landsliding. Okay. Okay, American Water Infrastructure Act, it's required to community water system that serve more than 3,300 people to complete risk and resilience assessment and develop an emergency plan, response plan. The city first assessment, the plan was complete in 2021. This is required by the to review every 5 years. The proposed funding, water rate revenue. And we have the North College, and I think this is complete. This project is complete. Yes, yes. So this project, it's Oregon Department of Transportation, or that's will extend the sidewalk and bike lane north the west side of North College. So our existing water line needs to be relocated ahead with the audit.
I live off North College, and the bike lanes are only on the west. So we're planning for downhill, right? Bikes. It kind of makes sense, but
I think
instead of both sides of the highway.
don't actually know what the plan for ODOT is, mostly because they don't involve us in
Yes.
their design
projects.
That's a state highway. That's not college. That's the State Highway 219.
I know.
But
I'm just
but they don't know. That's what they said.
Well,
the
it's
city-
in here, so.
Yeah,
on the west
so
side.
our portion of it was moving the water line. So we moved the water line, and
And
while Karin had more knowledge about that project, I don't. So that'll be that'll be something that I have to get back to you on.
So the west may not be right.
My assumption was that they were gonna do both. Yeah, as far as,
Curious.
So just to clarify, we are incurring this cost because ODOT said we're gonna do some construction and you need to move your water lines accordingly.
yep, true.
Got it.
Does ODOT, are they aware of things like that?
That it is a
Wait.
cost to us.
Yeah, I mean, when they make decisions to approve or not approve a project, do they communicate with the local cities to understand the impact? And
As Yeah, it's my understanding that they do communicate with us and they work with us on some degree about when we can afford it. But at the end of the day, if they have a program moving forward, it's their sandbox in our sandbox kind of deal.
Questions, that's the total water project we planning on working on.
It's in that first column, it's supposed to be 21, 22. It's,
Yes, you're right.
so it's, that's already done.
Yeah.
That's an actual,
Tom, you asked the question. I want to make sure you got an answer to it. These projects are being reviewed, and I thought I heard you say these projects are gonna lead into the budget, into the expenditures for the group.
yeah,
And my answer to that is kind of, sort of not. The city mandates, and so their current budget is being controlled by the city council. So the city council can decide, hey, we're gonna cut it in half for whatever reason that they decide. And they have to deal with half. Just like at work, if my senior VP and president goes, we're gonna go do X, they have to follow the line.
Mhm.
So it's the budget that the city council tells and allows them to do, and does that yearly within the year control. So these projects, like you saw, they may propose them, they may initiate them. The city council can say yeah or nay, except for the state mandated ones, and there's consequences with that, legalities and blah, blah, blah. The city council owns that. They just have to follow through. So it's not just everything that they say they're gonna go do. They're gonna have budget constraints within the given year from the city council. That's why these are a flavor
Mhm.
of the work, but not the exact details. They change. Because what you thought 1 year, 2 years from now, when you do the
Right,
next
right,
review,
of
it's
course.
gonna have different flavors to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to
I'm with you, Ron. One thing I want to add to that, though, is on a number of these slides, the reference to the funding source being utility rates is dominating the slide. So I get what you're saying, that we're paying into the pot. They'll figure out the general fund and how each department gets whatever. But we materially will change the outcome, or could, by what happens with utility rates.
Well, we'll recommend utility rates,
Right.
correct? We don't actually make any
Agreed.
decisions.
Nor do we make decisions on the
Yes.
projects.
It's just like every group that's not the city council, like when I was on planning commission. We would come up with, there would be items that the planning team would come up and say, okay, well, let's go ahead and review that. Well, we could pass it off and the city council could say, nah, like I remember one specific example, someone had a turnaround that was illegally built. And planning commission will say, well, that wasn't to code. And so we struck that down, but the city council said, well, we're not gonna be jerks about this. We'll make an exception here. So I think just like in this group, we will make a recommendation, but it's really up to city council to say, we'll take that recommendation and we feel that it's in the best interest of our city to do that.
Highlighted. Sub-council over SDCs. How to do that. Solar projects though, they tie into the system.
Right.
And that's why you have the rate. The rates do a little bit for like right. For utility, your community want to have utilities. I'm trying to sign now, cool. We want the utilities to work. I want water, when I want flush, I want it to go away. That's one piece. The other piece is the budgetary piece, as far as me going off and do it within a fiscally responsibility. And that's what Deb kind of gives us the prelude, if I heard it correctly last time. The cheapest way to run your utility system is to have some self-funded pieces, especially for the pieces that are aged. Like, my community is 25 years old. So SDCs are not going to fund me, right? So any improvements that go off in water flow, whether it be the pipes or whatnot, won't fund my area, will fund the new development, whatever that may be. Does that make sense?
Me, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, it was a great question, because it is a lot for the rates. And that's hopefully a good intro for Deb. Trying to.
Thank you.
Can I say something? real
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Derek, you mentioned the general fund, and I am new to the city, so Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but for our general utility projects, if it's part of a utility like water utility, we only use money for that utility. So we don't get any general fund money for utility projects like that. So for streets, it's the TUF fund, and then like we get gas tax money from the state and some SDC funds, and that's it.
So are you saying that the sole source of funding for these water projects are you water either grants, programs, or utility bills?
The SDC funds, yes.
Well, then,
And I'll get to
Ron, I
that.
think it has a more direct impact on what we're talking about than, or not.
But SDCs, again, are primarily about growing that particular piece, right? So
Well-
again, we go and annex a piece of land, the developer puts up, and they're growing their pipe. But all of us are almost responsible for that additional incremental usage to make sure that those pipes are going, it's like we used to do traffic studies all the time. And each traffic study, it would be 30 cars, which doesn't meet the requirement, but then you add 30 of those projects up. And now you're looking at like 150 new trips, and then that would trigger an analysis of some sort. But those STCs are really just about that specific project and getting utilities and water and waste to those specific parts. But like Ron was talking about, like I live in a place that's 20 or so years old. Like that's not my portion of my responsibility for the city is my fees that I pay to the city of Newberg every month to make sure that our services run, that I can get water out of the pipes when I need them, and I can flush the toilet and it doesn't come back into my house at the end of the day. So, as well as the streets that are now on that are on the.
Ready? Okay, let's switch over PowerPoint. I'm Deb Gallardi, Gallardi Rostein Group. Happy to see you all in person this time. So today we'll do the initial deep dive into water. And we have roughly 2 meetings scheduled for each system. We started with the most complicated one, I think, in terms of just the scale of some of the issues that we're dealing with, and the fact that the plant is in process, but the financing package isn't settled yet. So let's go to the next slide. Just a little review from last time of the process, the components of what we're looking at as part of these every other year reviews. So tonight we'll be talking about the financial needs. So the engineering staff did a great job of identifying the capital improvements that are looking in the 5-year window. The models, that Sarah was talking about, they actually go out longer term. We look at 10 years for all the systems. When the city was putting together the financing package for the water treatment plant, we had to extend the financial projections out 35 years because the lending agency wants to make sure that the city can pay off the debt over the long term. And you'll see that, so you have to keep that in mind, that with this system in particular, we can't be too focused on the 2-year period because of the plant construction is over multiple years. The financing starts at the end. So we have to be planning always for down the road, and the water is particularly key on that. So now I'll roll in some additional information about debt service, operation and maintenance cost. As you said, the rates have to cover that. Contingencies and reserves to account for emergencies and cash flow issues. We'll talk a little bit about how we forecast revenue for water and what other revenue sources are available in this planning period. At the next meeting, we'll get more into the rate structure and also considering again what are the future revenue increases that might be coming out of this process or being recommended to council. Let's go to the next slide. So as has been mentioned, this is an enterprise fund, the water system, which means it is supported solely by sources that are generated by the water system. So that means primarily user fees or rates. And you can see in the pie chart that about for the FY fiscal year 24 budget, that the rates are 82% of the total budget and are estimated to be about $7.3 million for the year. SDCs are robust this year because of the amount of development activity. And they are estimated to be about 1.3 million. So that is a significant funding source currently. That can change as development changes. So it's a less predictable source of revenue. And there are some other minor sources, interest earnings and other fees and charges associated with specific services provided by the utility. Within this planning period, there are grant funds that the city is eligible for and anticipates at about 2.2 million, which is great. You know, when we've done this in the past, that line item is usually zero, but luckily there are external revenues coming in. There is also the anticipation that the city council is going to allocate a portion of a new funding source, the red light camera, to a portion of those funds to water, and that estimate is $200,000.
So I'm not aware of we tore our red light cameras out when we did the Springbrook. So this is the first time I'm hearing about a red light camera. Where is that going to be located at?
Yep, we've been approved by ODOT for 2 locations right now. So we have one on 99 and Villa, and then the other one will be First and Main Street. And then there was also a House bill that just recently passed this last congressional time. So starting January, cities don't have to go through ODOT anymore to get approval for red light cameras if they want to front load the cost of the cameras themselves. So you'll probably be seeing a whole lot more red light cameras across the state once that gets open. And I think we're looking at adding at least 2 more cameras, depending on the revenue for these. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. I'm sure would. So I didn't like them when we had them here in Newberg, but I especially didn't like them when my wife was in the middle of a yellow light and then thought she was like gonna get hit with a ticket, so she sped up and actually got hit with a speeding ticket and not with a running red light. So I'm just curious, because I remember the one in Springbrook, because it would flash at me every day when I went into work, even though I was on a green. Like what? And this is probably the wrong venue for this. I guess I should probably bring this discussion to the city council. Yeah. So have we gone down that route quite a ways?
Yes, I think the red light cameras we've been working towards that for the last year at least. And both of those intersections were identified due to safety concerns from ODOT. That's why the Springbrook one did not qualify, because there's no safety concerns for that one.
I feel like it creates safety more than anything else.
They do actually increase rear end accidents, but you have to prove safety data of like the T-boning crashes and other like pedestrian accidents. So there's other crash data that you have to submit, and it's actually quite a process to get approved for any sort of red light camera.
Yeah, I saw that when I was reviewing the packet. I was like, you don't have these. Where is this coming from? So, and then, yeah, I guess I'll take this call.
Presentation about it, so I can answer some questions too.
Do we administer the entire program, or is there a third party that does all the ticketing and everything? Because I know that there's in other jurisdictions, like the city will get a very small portion of the actual ticket costs associated with that.
Correct. We're using a third party because that's what's required through ODOT right now. We're using Conduit is the company, which is pretty common. There's only about 3 vendors. So there is a portion. So a portion of it does go to the state, and then we do get a portion of the ticket cost.
Where that's like a revenue share with this.
It is correct. It is
Exactly.
a revenue share.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this kind of gets into last time's conversation a little bit around that the rates to some degree are funding road projects. right? And we discussed that a little bit in terms of that sounded strange. Apparently that's come up in prior years. This is kind of another one of those, it's sort of the opposite, where you're using funding from a red light camera to fund water projects.
So the red light camera will be general fund money. And it's a council goal that we would like to reduce our overall debt for the city. So that is something that it's going to be something that council is working on, where we're hoping to use some of this additional revenue that we have to pay down some of our debt. So we're hoping to allocate some of this money towards this water plant debt that we're going to be incurring, because we're expecting that to have a higher interest rate than our existing debt that we have. So that's kind of our tentative plan, but it's coming to council soon before the budget process. So a lot of that is still in the works, but we're just trying to kind of work in some of that now to the model that we know that we want to use some of this new money to try and
Yeah. and-
offset some of
and My
this.
point isn't necessarily about that. It's just, it seems like apples and oranges that you're mixing here.
Yes, general fund money is unrestricted funds, so you can use that for anything. If we did not want to use any of the red light camera towards the rates, then that would just mean the water rates probably would have to go up more, which was also something that was a council goal, to not have those go up astronomically. So I think we're trying to get creative with solutions to keep the rates at a reasonable price, right now. So just looking at all options at this point.
Okay.
There's only so many people that can be talking dirges and also on.
Oh. So, so is the only mechanism for this group the specific rates? Or do we have other levers that we can pull? Like, for example, I know transportation is part of this. We have other neighboring communities that use gas taxes, like the local gas taxes, to also fund some of this. We're only within the rate on our utility bills here. So we can make those specific recommendations if we wanted to get creative and say, because a large portion again of our economy here is agricultural tourism, it would maybe make sense to throw a few cents on a gallon of gas and have those people paying fees in as opposed to sticking it to the community a little bit. So we can only talk about rates here though in this group. correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Only those 4 rates is
Alright.
all the purview we have here.
Thank you.
But just for clarification, when we make the presentation to city council, as part of the public,
Yeah.
you can have your public statement added to that, so city council hears your concern or your ideas.
Yeah.
So, and that'll facilitate that facet of that. But yes, for the community, but the public part, you can add.
Okay, so within the purview, we're making a recommendation for the rates to support the budget here. And then as my own personal person, if I want to come and say, I think red light cameras are dangerous and kind of stupid, then I can do that at the city council. And oh, by the way, have we ever considered putting a 2 or 3% tax on gas in addition, so that, especially I think with, me getting $150 ticket, I can pay it. It's not an issue. A lot of families in Newberg who get a $150 ticket, that is a backbreaker for them, as opposed to paying an extra 3 cents for a gallon of gas as an example for that. So, okay, duly noted, Ron. Thank you.
Okay, one other funding source to note is that the bad news about higher interest rates is it costs more money to borrow money and things, but also the city has some certificates of deposit that will be accruing interest and when they mature, and so there's some additional funds that is coming from those as well. Okay, so I wanted to just show the water rates again. In part because it's important to understand the components and what the factors are that contribute to the revenue forecast. So when we forecast water rates, part of it is related to the number of customers, because there's a portion of the charge that's fixed, same amount every month based on the meter size. It goes up with the meter size. And a portion of the charge is volumetric, So it very much, you'll see, fluctuates with water sales, which are driven by both number of customers, but also weather and other factors. So as I mentioned, we'll be getting into at the next meeting a little bit more about why are the rates differ by customer class, and what are some of the factors that are driving that. Because in addition to the committee making recommendations about general revenue increases, they also make recommendations about changes to the rate structure. So obviously, water revenue, sales revenue is dependent on the rates themselves, the growth in customers, and changes to water volumes that are sold every year. So this next slide just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the last 10 years of rate increases. And we talk about rate increases, but it's also, it's important to recognize that these are the average revenue increases that the rates overall are estimated to generate. Because you'll see when we talk at the next meeting that the individual rate components can go up at different percentages. So you might have what has been happening in the historically is that the fixed charge has been increasing a little bit at a little bit higher percentage than the volume charge, because as people conserve more, as more water efficient plumbing fixtures are implemented and put into homes, the usage per account has been declining, which is a great thing for longer term planning and keeping costs low. You don't have to invest in larger facilities as quickly, but the city still needs to cover the costs of operating and maintaining the system, which don't decrease at the same rate that consumption might decrease. So in any event, so these are the rate increases that were implemented, the overall revenue increases that were implemented in each of the last 10 years. A couple of things to just highlight is you see that there was 1 year, there was 0 rate increase. Council did modifications to the budget, moving staff costs, cutting capital to have a 0% rate increase. However, you'll see that 2 years later, that the rate increase kind of spiked over what the prior 2 years had been. So there was a little bit of catch up there because there were significant capital improvements that were needed. A new reservoir water treatment plant reserve started, thinking about the future. Luckily, the city did some debt refunding during this historical period, which definitely saved money. So you see then in like 17 and 18, the rate increases were able to be cut back a little bit to more of kind of an inflationary level. And it was an interim period awaiting the completion of the water system master plan. So once that plan was completed, and that plan looks out 20 years. So that's where a lot of these projects that are included in this planning period, those were identified. And so then in 2019, the rate increases were increased to 4%, to looking at how to fund those, begin planning to increase the capacity of the rates to be able to complete those projects over a reasonable period of time, and also to deal with just operation and maintenance costs. I do want to point out that the water treatment plant was identified as a project in the last rate review process. However, the price tag has increased significantly. So the plant was in the very early stages of conceptual design, I guess. And it had been first identified at 13 million, and now it's a $21 million plant, just for the plant. And obviously, we've had huge amount of inflation over the last couple of years. The design concept has been refined and all, so it's not unusual for those sorts of swings, but I want to just point that out, that we are dealing with a much more expensive plant.
But I thought it was shared that the plant, the number, the 21 million was because we packaged capital projects together to ensure a grant.
That's the 27 million.
Okay, 27. Thank
So
you.
the plant itself is still
20, okay.
higher. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. So the other thing to note is that so rate increases have generally occurred every year except for that year in 2013. I think last time we talked a lot about how those rate increases compare to some of the national averages and inflation, and are not out of line at all with those numbers. And when you think about it, their costs continue to increase. The city is impacted just like we all are in terms of raising increased costs for materials, labor, everything, and construction costs. And so even just keeping pace with inflation requires rate increases. And then there is the issue of being able to fund capital projects, which in this period, there are significant investments that are needed. So the prior plan did include, as an assumption, continued rate increases at 4% per year, which now we are testing that to see, is that still on track, or has things shifted such that we can, that there's a modification that's needed. Okay, so I always like to look a little bit about, as Ron said, of things don't, even when you're just talking about a 2-year, 2 years ago, things don't occur as we plan exactly. Sometimes things are better from a water financial planning aspect, and sometimes things are worse, like the plant now being more expensive. The plus side is that customer growth has been stronger than anticipated. So this chart here shows you the green line or the boxes. Those are the actual increases in customers, and what the new projection is, which is slightly higher because city planning and development has identified that there are projects in the pipeline, development projects in the pipeline that will continue to have that customer growth be higher than what we had previously projected. So from a revenue standpoint, that's a good thing.
And this growth is just due to the growth in people in Newberg?
Exactly, and the number of new
businesses
households
or-
and businesses, exactly. Water sales revenue is less stable and much harder to predict. Generally, though, along with stronger customer growth comes stronger water sales, with some peaks and valleys thrown in there. So, we've had, this is not unusual at all to see fluctuations like this. It's been pretty warm and pretty dry. So, we anticipate that for the next couple of years that, the current year that we're in, and likely the next budget year, that the revenues will continue to be higher than what we projected, or the sales volumes will be higher than what we projected last time.
Yeah.
So that's also good.
So obviously, I think we all know what 1920 is. What's the drop like? Is it correlated? You mentioned temperatures, but like in 21, 22, what's the correlation there as to why you saw total volume?
Decrease?
Yeah, drop.
I think that was a year when it was was less warm. This was a fiscal year, so that would have been the summer of 21, right? I think. And then the last year that ended in June of 23 would have been the summer of 22. So certainly there was COVID. It did impact, like you said, 20. So yeah, there were some interesting factors in this last few years for sure. Okay, the next slide just shows you where the 7.3 million that's in the current budget year comes from in terms of the types of customers. And you'll see that over 50% is single family residential, and commercial and multifamily and irrigation all are similarly sized slices of the pie. They make up kind of the next largest segment, like a third then. And then very small components for non-potable, public agency, which is just tracked separately and charged separately in the rate structure, and a few small component of outside city customers. So residential combined is what, about 67, about 2/3 of the water sales revenue comes from residential customers, whether it be single family or multifamily.
The one question I had was, can we map like volumes to revenue to understand like, because obviously we want to know what the revenue is in terms of portion of the pie here, but it would be interesting to see the volume from these various categories
sure.
as well.
Yeah.
Associated with that,
Yeah.
just to understand, because I think we know what the revenue is from a piece of the pie, but it'd be interesting to see like from like a per volume, per dollar perspective to see, are there areas where like industry is really going heavy at water, but they're getting discounts on that? And then is that somewhere where the citizens, for an example, we could keep lower rates potentially a little bit lower, but then maybe make small increases on the industry to try to, again, move those levers a little bit? Okay.
Yep, we could definitely talk about that at the next meeting. Yeah, good question. Okay, great.
I have a quick question.
yeah, go ahead.
I know I'm gonna feel stupid when you tell me the answer, but public agencies include,
Sharon, can you help me with that? Do you know? Oh, sorry, put her on the spot. I think is that, yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I think schools
Right?
would be
Yeah.
in that.
I think George
Like
Fox
Like
is in
George
that
Fox,
also.
Maybe so.
Newberg School
Yeah.
District.
Yeah.
George Fox.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, and then
yeah,
and then just as a recap, if I remember correctly, last year, or not last year, on the last meeting, the city actually doesn't incur any cost for that. There's like a 7%, I think, part of the budget where that covers really the city's usage of water or something along those lines.
Oh,
Yeah, the
we'll get to-
franchise fee.
we'll get to
So-
the franchise fee.
So that covers basically if, city or someone within the realm of that is doing purview within the city realm, those, we don't charge them. That kind of falls under that franchise fee.
Okay, next slide. So this just shows you then putting all those pieces together, the customer growth, the water sales volumes, and this is what the revenue, the green line being the updated, the actuals revenue and the projected estimated for FY 24. So again, higher than what was anticipated in 2 years ago. Okay, now we're gonna go look at the expense side. The pie chart shows the fiscal year 24 operation and maintenance, or O&M budget. And the total operating costs are 5.8 million that are roughly in the budget. You can see the components of that include about 40% for personnel, materials and services, which include things like the operating supplies, the city's own utility costs, electricity kind of costs, fuel, those sorts of things. meters, pipes, vehicle replacements. So there is some, I call it the small C capital outlay that's included in the operating budget, but that's just kind of in-house repairs, small kind of
Deb,
repairs.
has any of that gone down with a new solar farm? Are we benefiting at all from that for any of these, or is that all going elsewhere?
Sadly, with the solar farm, soon as that went on, PG had a very high increase, so then we didn't really see it was like a net zero.
Hmm.
I know, so it was kind of wah, yeah, when it all happened.
Yeah.
But it does mean that we don't have to pay that increased rate for whatever we are making on the solar field. So.
Great question, though. And then you can see that the franchise fees, which, as you mentioned, are 7% on the water sales revenue, as being a component, and the internal services. So the support services for all those shared departments like finance, human resources, IT, city manager, legal, all of that. So those are the primary components of the operation and maintenance budget, and we forecast those out based on any anticipated personnel changes, just general inflation, and kind of historical trends in the salaries and benefits kind of costs, and health insurance and various other types of costs are increasing significantly higher than the average rate of inflation.
A question for you on that.
Yeah.
So those personnel expenses and associated benefit expenses, et cetera, are being somewhat subsidized by this franchise fee back to the city's general fund?
No, well, so the personnel, all of these costs, the 5.8 million, are covered by water rates. The franchise fee and the internal services are payments to the city general fund. The internal services are for shared services. And I don't know if you want to say anything about the franchise fee revenues in terms of what the.
I think you did. I think I get that.
Okay.
It goes back to the city. I get it.
It does go back to the city. Yeah. I don't know what specific services, but yeah. Okay.
So does the depreciation expense from all of the capital improvements, does that go into this? Or is that still just?
That's a great question. No, so the depreciation, we are setting rates based on the cash needs, but the depreciation rate and just the value factors into when we think about the reserves and what the city should be holding in reserve for emergency repairs or ongoing kind of rate stabilization. So we're going to get back to that in a few slides here. So this is these are the cash outlays.
So really, this is operating expense, but really it's operating cash flow?
Yes, this is what is the budgeted need that the rates, that 7.3 million in rate revenue needs to cover for fiscal year 2024.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say the balance of the 7.3 and 5.8 goes into a reserve for what we're going to be funding? Is that where we're heading?
Well, no, next slide is debt service. So there is still debt on past investments in facilities. And some of those were facilities that were related to growth. And so you can see that in the debt service that leads up to FY fiscal year 2028 is being funded mostly by SDC revenues, because these were new reservoirs and things that were needed to expand the capacity in the system for growth. So the SDCs under Oregon law can go to pay the debt service associated with that. So the rates don't need to cover that, but the SDCs do. But that does take away the ability of SDC revenue to pay for new capital, it's all got, so it's got to come from somewhere. And there's only so much SDC revenue to go around. So it first goes to pay debt service, and then anything else is then made available, to fund the capital projects in the current year. So a couple of other things to note about this. Good news is the debt drops off, right? The existing debt will be mature during this 5-year period, which is perfect timing because the WIFIA, the new debt for the water treatment plant, then comes online, anticipated right now in FY fiscal year 2029. The structure of that debt is still to be determined. That the city will sign that contract, that loan agreement, not till spring, like March. So, and we don't know the interest rate yet. Right now, we're assuming it's going to be about 5%. The city will need to make decisions about whether it's going to secure that loan with a full faith and credit pledge of the city, which means there's not a requirement to set rates every year that are over and above the debt service and the operation and maintenance of the utility, plus some cushion. And that is one thing that happened in the last 10 years was the city couldn't meet its debt coverage requirements on some of the prior loans and had to have emergency rate increases or move. That's in part why that staff costs were moved to other funds because the city could not meet its coverage requirements. So that's an important decision that the city will need to make before March, and we'll be running some numbers to look at that. Again, that's more of a longer term issue because as the current debt drops off, meeting coverage requirements would be fairly easy to make in the short term, but in the long term, maybe not so much. So it's a complicated financing structure.
Is there a target debt service ratio for the utility relative to these capital improvements?
Well, generally, there would be a 1.25 required, so 25% over and above that. And what that means is that the net revenue, so your revenue coming in from your water rates and whatever other, fees and charges, would need to be able to cover the operation and maintenance costs, plus the debt service, plus 25%. Yeah.
That yellow bar doesn't scream 25%.
Oh, this is just the debt service, and the FY 29. So one thing nice about the WIFIA program is the city can defer a lot, but it's going to still be accruing interest as it draws money. So the plant construction is going to start immediately. And so, and the city is planning to use cash reserves to cash fund pay as you go initially, but then is going to have to start drawing that on those loan proceeds, and then it's going to start accruing interest, but it doesn't have to pay that interest till immediately after the construction. So that's why that 2029 number is high. And then it drops off. So it's assumed, and this is still yet to be determined, that the first year payment in FY 2029 would be a debt service payment plus whatever interest cost expense that the city has accrued by borrowing funds over a 3 or 4 year period. So
Yeah, and hopefully when we come back for like the town hall in February, we'll have a lot more of this figured out by then, whether or not we're doing the revenue water system pledge or if we're doing the full faith and credit pledge. The full faith and credit pledge would essentially be that we're pledging our general fund revenue to cover the cost of the debt service if the utilities couldn't cover that, instead of building in a buffer on the water rates, which might actually be a better method. Just kind of depends on how you look at it. If we do the full faith and credit pledge, it could potentially affect us borrowing in the future. So we also have to kind of look to see what other debt service we're planning in like the next 10 years. I don't foresee us having anything right now, but we also didn't foresee the state mandate for this. So sometimes it's kind of hard to know. So we're still kind of working out a lot of the details on that. So hopefully we'll have a lot more information on but in February when we come back for the town hall.
It gave me pause that the debt service starting in 2029 is yellow, indicating it is rate funded. And that relative to revenue would be higher than the debt service we just talked about, but that's still being negotiated.
Yeah, and actually, so part of the debt service associated with the new plant obviously is to meet the needs of future growth. You're replacing your current plant, you're also building a bigger plant. I think it was going from 5 to 9 million gallons a day capacity. So you will be able to use SDC revenue to help pay that debt. But there's also capital projects that are growth related in those same years. So right now I just had put that, whereas, you know, these other, the existing debt is very much focused on the SDCs, and the city's practice has been to pay that with SDCs. And we know that SDC revenue, well, as best we can know, looking forward, is going to be sufficient to pay that. Once we start getting out beyond 5 years, things get a little more speculative. So anyway, yes, but some SDC funds can definitely be used to pay for that plant. It's just going to be a question of how much every year is coming in. So we need to plan for the rates to be able to fulfill that. Okay. Capital improvements on the next page. So again, into the things don't always, things change even over the course of 2 years. Current plan is in the blue bars, and the prior plan is in the red bars. So the prior plan was the plan that the rate review committee looked at beginning in 21, I guess. Wait, yeah, it would have been 2021. So overall, this new plan, the current plan, as I call it, is higher. That's because mainly the water treatment plant and just inflationary increases. So the prior plan during this 8-year period where the two plans overlapped, the expenditures were projected to be 35 million. The current plan is 44 million, some of which has already occurred. So 22 is in the books. The 23 fiscal 23 just ended in June of 2020 of this year. And so the rest of it is forecast. So as Ron said, fiscal 24 is the budgeted year. Fiscal 25 going through 2029, that's all projected. So it will depend on what the actual cost of the plant is and what other improvements as the city works through some of these mandated projects, which are really driving the costs within this planning period. But you'll note that it really, right now, the costs really decreased significantly in the last 2 years of this window, but you know, things change too.
Did those savings make it into reserve?
Well, there really hasn't been, you know, when you look at, yes. So any time where there was sort of in terms of the actuals, where expenditures were below what had been projected, yeah, that would be
22 and 23 is what I'm getting at.
Yes,
And the inverse
yes.
of that happens over the next 5.
yes, and I'll show you where we are with the reserves
Perfect, thank
shortly
you.
here. Yep. So
And just another question, is part of this just like a shift on when we expected some of that to occur?
absolutely.
Because I noticed, for example, FY 2027 is a huge difference, but is part of that just, we anticipated that project, the big overlooming project to be done in 2026, and that almost makes up for 6 million of the total 8 there.
Yeah,
associated. Is that
this-
really the big
Absolutely.
crux at hand here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Just to note that the city is limited in what it can issue in terms of debt for the plan, as was discussed. It's 49% of the 27 million, so it's some around 13 million that can be leveraged from debt. and the rest has to come from systems development charges, rates within the planning period, plus whatever reserves, and the grants and other sources that we identified. Okay, next slide gets into where the money is right now, based on my models, where we can sort of take money from to pay for these things if this plan, if things materialize as what is projected. So the strategy is to utilize rates and reserves upfront, as I said, to reduce the financing costs during construction. So the rates and reserves are the blue. So you can see in fiscal year 2025, big chunk of blue, just a little bit of debt proceeds. Because we don't want to, we can't spend all the cash. The city has to maintain adequate cash reserves. What is adequate cash reserves is something that's a policy decision. And certainly the rate review committee has made recommendations in prior years about what that should look like. And so we'll be discussing that more. SDC revenue, you can see there's some little chunks of SDCs, but as I said, right now, SDCs are primarily going to pay for debt service. So that's why you don't see too much red in the actual capital spending. And because in the middle there, it's pretty much dominated by the plant. So yeah, that's what so the debt service is modeled based on those kind of draws for funding the plant. Okay, the next slide. Keep an eye on the time here. Cash reserves are an important part of the city's financial planning for any of its funds. The American Water Works Association has specific not requirements, but guidelines and recommendations for how cities plan for what types of reserves should be included, and some general guidelines around, the amount of reserves. Reserves are super important for stabilizing rates in times where unanticipated expenditures, lower than forecast revenues, and when the state mandates things that you didn't plan, or that inflation eats up, makes the costs increase more. So this has been an important part of the rate review discussions. The types of reserves that are included in the financial model are the standard reserves of an operating reserve, which is based on the number of days of cash and generally for utilities of this size, it can be anywhere from 60 to 90, 180 days worth of cash flow kind of reserve. Higher if you don't have the other types of reserve. So we're including a 60-day operating reserve as kind of the baseline, a capital reserve that is equal to, and that includes a portion that's based on the sales revenue percent and a portion that's based on depreciation. And I'll show you exactly what those numbers are in a minute. Debt service, because you've got to have a debt service payment in the bank in order, because of the timing of when the debt service is due. So each year, you can't spend down your cash to zero because you got to make a debt payment. And then this, general rate stabilization reserve. And the next slide shows you what those numbers look like for the current budget year, and then assuming the funding mix that I showed you for the capital improvements, what that might be drawn down to towards the end of the 5-year planning window. So again, it's a 60-day operating reserve, which is on the lower end of industry average, but because we're including a rate stabilization / capital reserve on top of that, that's generally seen as financially, fiscally responsible. The debt service is equal to a year of debt service. And so you can see what those numbers are. So the operating contingency is about $1 million. Debt service is about 850,000. And the capital is what the actual, well, let's see, what did I? Oh, the capital, the equipment replacement is the 500,000. And I think the capital is just what kind of was the difference between what the expenditures, what the projected expenditures were and the revenues. And the 8.2 million is kind of that. This is the amount that can be utilized in part to pay for that initial plant construction. So part of this has been, part of why that money is there is because the city has planned for that. So the rate increases in the prior years have been set higher than what they would have needed to be to just cover the expenses in some years. And with the intention of, we know this big expense is coming, we need to be planning for that so that we can minimize our financing costs. Part of it is because there just needs to be, so part of it is assumed to be spent within this planning period. Part of it is assumed to be maintained for those sort of emergency situations. And then part of it was just reflected the fact that costs came in, maybe, things were deferred or didn't happen as quickly. Revenues came in higher because customer growth was higher. So we got lucky in some cases, we planned for in other cases. But you can see that $6 million is, or somewhere thereabouts, is planned to be utilized to buy down any kind of debt financing that the city would otherwise had to incur. If the city didn't have those funds, we'd be having a much different discussion. Yeah.
And I just had one question. I remember on the prior presentation, one of the selling points on the new wastewater treatment plant, or the treatment plant, was 25 to 50% reduction in operation and maintenance costs. Are those calculated as part of this estimate here? Or are we using our current operating and maintenance costs associated with the 28, 29 as part of that?
That's a great question. So there has been some discussion about there potentially being lower operating costs as a result of the new plant technology and things. That won't be known or realized until the plant is online after, 2029. So at this point, it doesn't impact the short-term costs, but it's a great question. And in a couple of years, when the rate review committee, hopefully there will be some better estimates in terms of what impact. Yeah.
So the 60 days is really predicated on our current operating and maintenance costs. And then if there's any reduction, really all that's doing is increasing the buffer on our operating above 60 days at that point, if these numbers stay as anticipated.
Yeah, the 60 days. So the 950,000 is based on the current operating budget, and then taking, 60 days divided by 365, it's something like 15% of the operating budget. And so you can see that increases towards the end of the plan as operation and maintenance costs are anticipated to increase. But if they don't increase as much because there's some savings somewhere, then that number would be lower. Yeah. And that rate stabilization minimum, so that in 28, 29, the 5 point, there's a $2.6 million of rate stabilization. That's getting back to the depreciation. So that 2.6 million is made up of 2% of asset value, which is kind of a general depreciation number when you're talking about pipes that have long lives, or at least hopefully they do. And then 5% of rate revenue. So again, it's meant to be kind of a stabilization that if there's something happens to the system, or the fact that the capital investment is lumpy, it's one year it's high, the next year it's going to be lower, so you got to be able to smooth out. We don't want to have, the rate increase this year is 3%, but next year it's going to be 8%, something like that. So it allows to smooth things out over time.
Question about the 5% of rate revenue contributing to the stabilization minimums.
Yeah.
Has that been adjusted for the forecast of new accounts and sales?
Yeah, that is based on, that is just 5% of whatever the rate revenue is in any given year. And so that is a variable number. So in some cases, cities will say, we want to have $10 million. We want a $10 million or, you know, pick a number. And McMinnville has cash financed their wastewater system for years and years, and they just pick a large number that they know will cover their expenses for going forward. And they have been very disciplined about not dropping below that. And for a while their rates were really high, but now they're kind of on the lower end. So there's that strategy, or there's, you know, the more common strategy of just, you know, use some percentage of your asset value, use some percentage of your annual revenue, and just, you know, maintain that over time. And as a way to just hedge against unknown circumstances. Okay, so finally, just 2 more slides. Sorry, no, we're getting late. This chart is really busy. Sorry. Trying to show a lot in one chart, maybe not such a good idea, but let me orient you to bars are costs, lines are revenues and reserves. That's the first thing to understand. The bar, the colors of the bars relate to specific cost categories. So personnel is the bottom purple, then we go up. The next is other O&M, which is the materials and services, internal service charges, things like that. The orange, at least orange, yellow, depending on your screen or your printed copy, that's the capital transfers. So this is the capital that's coming out of the water fund and going towards funding capital improvements. And, you know, again, you've got in 2025, as we talked about, that's that big outflow that goes to cash fund the early work at the plant. And then that drops, and you'll see that when you do that, your reserve, which is the gray and black line, that drops significantly. So Katie's going to be a little nervous when seeing those numbers go down significantly. But that was its intended purpose in part. So and then the red line that kind of just sits above, right above or right at the top of the bars, that's the rate revenue that's projected. So that's how we calibrate the revenue forecast. So again, you can have years where you're spending more than your rate revenue as long as you've got reserves, and then your reserves are going to be drawn down. Some years, you know, you can have that rate revenue be slightly above that line or above your expenses, and that's where you add to your reserves. But you can see that with a continued 4% rate increase, which is what is factored in here, and the current assumptions that the reserves go down significantly and they kind of just stay, they fluctuate a little bit, but the idea is kind of to keep them at that 5 million level to include those various reserve components. And the debt the debt service, then in the out years, that's when the city has to start repaying that debt. So that's the preliminary forecast. We've got some fine tuning to do, and we'll have more discussions about this at the next meeting. But the good news is that the 4% that was projected previously still can hold, even though the plant increased significantly in costs. But council has, as was discussed, deferred some projects. The city has gotten the approval on the WIFIA loan, which while the interest rate is not as favorable as we'd hoped, the fact that you can defer interest, you can defer debt service and spread it out over a very long period of time keeps rates lower in the short term. Of course, it does increase the financing costs in the long term, but that's the trade-off.
Do you know the maximum duration of the WIFI loan? How long will they allow?
35 years. Yeah. So, but we don't have to start it until after the project is completed. So
Yeah, and that's what we've
What's
assumed
the
here.
interest rate?
we won't know the interest rate until the day we close in March. But Oregon City had just closed on one and theirs was around 5%. So we're kind of expecting to be somewhere around there.
Okay, last slide or last substantive slide is just kind of this, just to summarize. The good news, bad news, what puts downward pressure on the rates, which puts upward pressure on the rates. The growth was helpful. The deferred debt payment, the 35-year term, leveraging those existing reserves. And, you know, the deferred capital projects that council has already said that which have been included in this capital improvement plan that was presented. Upward pressure comes from just, you know, capital and financing costs continue to be significant, inflation, and the personnel costs are impacted by some existing staff retirements and new hires, and just, you know, what the city has to pay out in terms of its benefits based on where people were in the hierarchy, and that's definitely impacting some of the operation and maintenance costs. I see Peggy nodding her head. She has. Okay, next steps. We'll come back in a few weeks, talk more about water rates, the fixed and the volume charges, the rates by customer class, just more about the you know, where the revenue count or those sales. I'll bring that information that we discussed, and we can talk more about the debt structure and things like that. So happy to answer any final questions if you're not all worn out.
Any other questions? Thank you. That's always makes me happy going through this. This makes sense. All right. If there's anything else, then we go to public comment. Heather, has there been any input?
Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment?
Have you received any as far as email or whatnot? No. Okay. Then if there's any from the room, you guys can be public comment if you want to. You already captured, so you're already. I encourage you to work with your council member because they're doing a lot. If that's the case, and there's no public comment captured, then we can go to adjournment. And our next meeting is?
October 4th, I believe. And then I wanted to say one thing. Our Public Works Director, Russ Thomas, he has offered if anybody wants to take a tour of the water plant or the wastewater plant, he will be up to doing that one evening. So if anybody's interested, please let me know and I can arrange for a date to have a tour of the plant. I know you're.
Surprise face right here.
Yeah.
Anything else? Otherwise, I can also adjourn. Thank you.